Well, good evening. This is Jonathan Alexander, Live Border News, and I have a special guest, architect Richard Gage, joining me here tonight. And we're going to be going into discussion, series 2 for you, so you guys can hear exactly everything about 9/11. And we'll be right back live with you.
Ain't nothing but a simple man. Call me a redneck, I reckon that I am, but there's things going on that make me mad to the core. I gotta work like a dog to make ends meet. Got crooked politicians and crime in the street, and I'm madder than hell, and I ain't gonna take it no more. They tell our kids to just say no. A panty-waist judge lets a drug dealer go, slaps him on the wrist and turns him back out on the town. If I had my way with those selling dope, take a big tall tree and a short piece of rope, hang them up high, let them swing till the sun goes down. Hell, you know what's wrong with the world today? People done gone, put the Bibles away, living off the law of the jungle, not the law of the land. The good book says it, so I know it's true. It's an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. You better watch where you're going, remember where you've been. That's the way I see it, I'm a simple man. I'm the kind of guy that wouldn't harm a mouse. If I catch somebody breaking in my house, I got a 12-gauge shotgun waiting.
All right. Tonight we have special guest, architect Richard Gage, on 9/11 Truth. Richard Gage, AIA, is a 30-year-old San Francisco Bay Area architect, member of the American Institute of Architects. He is the founder and former CEO of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. He now leads the charge for a new World Trade Center investigation, along with his courageous wife and assistant, Gail, at richardgage911.org. Mr. Gage became interested in researching the destruction of the WTC World Trade Center high-rises after hearing the startling conclusions of a reluctant 9/11 researcher, Ray Griffin, on the radio in 2006, which launched his own unyielding quest for the truth about 9/11. The organization he founded, AIA 9/11 Truth, now numbers more than 3,500 architects and engineers demanding a new investigation into the destruction of all three World Trade Center high-rise buildings on 9/11. And I'm going to bring live here Richard. Good evening, Richard.
Good evening, John. Great to be here with you again.
That was a lot to read. You got one heck of a resume.
Yeah, that's the short version too.
That's the short version. So I'd like for you tonight to go into our session 2 that we're going to be talking about on the World Trade Centers. And I believe we're going to be discussing Tower 2. Is that correct?
Yeah, you bet. In fact, the explosiveness of the Twin Towers, we talked in session 1 about the destruction of Building 7, the third skyscraper that came down on 9/11 that most people don't know anything about. And we found that was an explosive controlled implosion. The Twin Towers are quite different. We look at the explosiveness of them in this session, and then in session 3, we're going to go into the extreme heat, all of the evidence for incendiaries. So we'll get to that one next time, but I'm excited to show you the evidence for the explosive demolition of Tower 1 and 2 today.
Right. Well, if you don't mind, would you mind going into depth now?
Let's do it. Yeah. Put me up there
ready.
And we'll just talk about it, because we don't want your audience to be the last to know about this evidence. And so if you can put that screen up, I've got it ready for you.
All right.
And the website where you can learn a whole lot more about all of this evidence. In fact, our documentary, 9/11 Explosive Evidence Experts Speak Out, is available to watch for free on the website, richardgage911.org. And Gail and I have been doing that full-time together for about 2 years, in the last 2 years, separate from Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. And let's just get right into it, John, because even as you look at these towers, here, the North Tower and the South Tower, each being destroyed, the South Tower on the left, the North Tower on the right, in very similar ways. And yet they have very, very different damage patterns from the airplane that hit them and the ensuing fires. So we're going to go into detail about these incredible trailing thick white smoke clouds in session 3. Today we're going to go into the behavior of these towers, beginning with, as we did with Building 7, we found that there's features of controlled demolition which parallel the behavior seen in the videos. Let's see if there is a sudden onset of destruction, the first feature of controlled demolition that we've been looking at, beginning with the North Tower. It's standing still, and then all of a sudden it's in uniform downward motion. No jolt, hesitation upon the impact of the cold, hard steel below. So just notice that and ask yourself, is this a collapse or is something else going on here? Well, we'll compare it. But look at the South Tower. Also, it's standing still, and then all of a sudden it's in uniform downward motion. And we'll get into the details of that motion in a moment. But let's ask ourselves what could be causing that, and are there witnesses that hear explosions, that see flashes of light? In fact, there's 118 of them initially, and now 186 altogether found by Professor Graham McQueen. And he did an extraordinary job reviewing the 12,000 pages of testimony from the oral histories. Thomas von Eschen interviewed his first responders, and within a month after 9/11, because he didn't want their story to be reshaped by a collective memory, as he called it. And he found Thomas von Essen's his witnesses from his own department were observing flashes, sounds of explosions, and other phenomena of explosive demolition. And you can see all of these transcripts of these explosive witnesses. We won't be able to go into them all today, but Graham McQueen, the late great Graham McQueen, has now passed on, but his testimony is available on our website, richardgage911.org. Just a few of them. We felt the ground shake. You could see the towers sway, and they did sway about 11 feet altogether at the top after the planes hit them, which is one of the several main proofs that planes did, in fact, hit these towers. And then it just came down, says this EMT worker. All of a sudden, the ground just started shaking. Felt like a train running under my feet. The next thing we know, we look up and the tower is collapsing. Again and again, you're going to hear this specific order of events with these first responders. They're seeing something or hearing something or feeling something, and then the tower begins to come down, because NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, who was tasked by Congress to explain these collapses to the American people, says, oh no, those sounds are the sound of a tower collapsing. No, listen, it shook my bones. Shortly before the first tower came down, I remember feeling the ground shaking. I heard a terrible noise, And then debris just started flying everywhere. An explosion appeared at the very top, simultaneously from all four sides. Materials shot out horizontally, and then there seemed to be a momentary delay before you could see the beginning of the collapse. I mean, how specific does it have to be to disprove the NIST theory limb from limb?
Yeah, exactly.
We were standing there with about 5 companies. We were just waiting for our assignment. And then there was an explosion in the South Tower. Kept watching. One floor under another. When it hit about the 5th floor, I figured it was a bomb because it looked like a synchronized, deliberate kind of thing. I saw a flash, flash, flash at the lower level of the building. You know, like when they demolish a building. It seemed like on television when they blow up these buildings. It seemed like it was going all the way around like a belt. All these explosions. Let's see what they're saying. North Tower on the right, a known controlled demolition on the left. Is there any similarity in the first 3 seconds or so?
Almost identical.
There's enough similarity to warrant an investigation into the possible use of explosives, especially since it looks exactly like a controlled demolition here in the beginning, and especially since fire, the official cause of these buildings' collapses, has never in history brought down a steel frame fire-protected building ever.
Exactly.
It's unprecedented. You ever see the professional demolition where they set the charges on certain floors and then you hear pop, pop, pop? That's when I heard that friggin' noise. That's when the building came down. I saw a number of brief light sources being emitted from inside the building between floors 10 and 15. He saw about 6 of these brief flashes, accompanied by a crackling sound before the tower collapsed. I saw low-level flashes. I saw flash, 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 and then it looked like the building came down. The building was blowing out on all 4 sides. We actually heard the pops. You know, you heard the pops of the building. With each popping sound, initially an orange and then a red flash came out of the building. And then it would just go all around the building on both sides, as far as I could see. Let's take a look at the South Tower on the right, a known controlled demolition on the left. Any similarity here? Enough to warrant an investigation into the possible use of explosives here too? Especially since it looks exactly like a controlled demolition in the beginning. Especially since fire, the official cause of this building's collapse, has never again in history brought down a steel frame fire-protected building. I thought the terrorists planted explosives somewhere in the building. That's how loud it was, a crackling explosive. Another loud boom at the upper floors. Then there was a series of smaller explosions, which appeared to go completely around the building at the upper floors. And another loud earth-shattering blast with a large fireball that blew out more debris. The lower level of the building, you know, like when they demolish a building, that's what I thought I saw. Did you see any flashes? I said, yes. Well, I thought it was just me. He said, no, I saw them too. Everybody at that point still thought these things were blown up. So I was fully expecting anything else to blow up. You were there when the planes hit? I said, no, I was there when the building exploded. You mean when it fell down? No, when it had exploded. He's pretty clear about what he saw. Let's listen to these witnesses.
As we were getting our gear on and making our way to the stairway, there was a heavy-duty explosion.
The whole building just collapsed on us inside the lobby.
Was that a secondary explosion?
Yes, it was.
That was the
Yeah, definitely secondary explosion.
I heard a second explosion and another rumble.
An hour later than that, we had that big explosion from much, much lower.
And just went boom, it was like a bomb went off. And another explosion came right from it, just everyone flying.
There were numerous secondary explosions taking place in that building. There were continuous explosions.
No, the first explosion, and there was a second explosion in the same building. Okay. There were 2 explosions.
Okay.
Federal agencies that were down there do believe that there was some sort of explosive device somewhere else besides the planes hitting.
There was another explosion that took place in one of the towers here. So obviously, according to his theory, he thinks that there were actually devices that were planted in the building.
There was a secondary explosion, probably a device either planted before or on the aircraft that did not explode until an hour later.
Then there was those secondary explosions and then the subsequent collapses.
That the FBI most likely thinks that there was a car or truck packed with explosives underneath the buildings, which also exploded at the same time and brought both of them down.
Now, that's the first time we're hearing that. So 2 planes and explosives that were in the building. Is that correct?
That is the working theory at this point. That is
a huge explosion now waiting to bring on all of us.
It sounded like gunfire, you know, bang, 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 and then all of a sudden 3 big explosions.
About 50 consecutive bangs, and it fell down like a waterfall.
And we heard the noise associated with an implosion.
We heard a very loud blast, an explosion. We looked up, and the building literally began to collapse before us.
We heard a loud explosion, and at that point, building 2 was collapsing.
At that point, we heard a large boom. I looked up and just saw the building coming at us.
Do you know if it was an explosion or if it was a building collapse?
To me, it sounded like an explosion.
There was another major explosion. The building itself, literally the top of it came down.
All of a sudden you hear explosion and you could see the building starting to collapse.
Huge explosion that we all heard and felt.
We understand now there has been a secondary explosion on Tower 2.
According to the Associated Press, another building that has either been attacked or exploded.
The tower, rather, that has collapsed, we are told, collapsed because of a third explosion.
And about an hour later after that, there was a huge explosion at the base of the South Tower. That's One World Trade Center, and part of the building collapsed.
We could hear a rumble, which was about 5 seconds long, preceding the actual collapse, and then a boom when each of those towers collapsed.
Just seconds ago, there was a huge explosion, and it appears right now the Second World Trade Tower has just collapsed.
I was about 5 blocks away when I heard explosions.
And then you heard from far away, boom, boom. And you heard the boom, 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 boom.
Floor by floor, it started popping out.
It was if they had detonated.
Yeah,
if they were
detonated,
planned to
yeah.
take down a building. Boom, 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 boom.
From the corner, boom, 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 boom. Just like 20 straight hits. And as the bombs were going, people just started running. And I sat there and watched a few of them explode, and it just started going pop. It just started going boom, 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 boom. And he goes, how fast? I go, like firecrackers.
How many of these witnesses of explosions do you imagine? And I'm only playing what, a dozen or so. There's 186 now found by Professor Graham McQueen. How many do you imagine that NIST included in any of their draft or final reports?
Yeah, exactly. And
Zero.
You're even hearing it from fire department guys as well.
Yeah. Oh, all kinds of them. And we can't put them all in, or we'd be having an hour just on those witnesses. So yeah, they've completely swept this under the rug. In fact, NIST claims that the upper block of floors above the point of jet plane impacts drove the rest of the building down to the ground and then destroyed itself. This is called the crush down, crush up theory. It has a problem, though. When 2 bodies collide, there's an equal and opposite destructive force. The top part, the lightest, the weakest, would be destroyed before even destroying a similar amount of mass below. So it completely violates Newton's third law of motion. Like say run a Mack truck into a Volkswagen, who wins, right? It's pretty clear. The Volkswagen gets destroyed. Does it matter if we drop the Volkswagen onto the Mack truck? No. The lightest part of a structure cannot possibly destroy the cold, hard, heavier, intact steel below. In fact, the way these skyscrapers are designed, the columns are lightest at the top, 3/8-inch thick I-beams, for instance, and getting heavier and heavier and heavier and heavier and heavier, as you can imagine, to support all that weight, increasing weight above them, 32 inches by 22 inches by 2-inch thick at mid-height, and these core columns almost solid steel at the bottom, 52 inches by 22 inches. So how in the world can this theory hold any water? It can't. In fact, let's see what happens with that Volkswagen on top. It's being destroyed. The lightest part is being destroyed in the first 3 seconds. Watch this way. Look at the lower red line. It doesn't move down until maybe now, right? So something else is destroying this Volkswagen on top. And so we have to ask ourselves, what's destroying it? It's telescoping in on itself. It's not pushing anything down below it. In fact, if it were there, we would see it in the photographs, in the videos, but it's not there in any of them. It has been destroyed in the first 3 seconds. After that, it's like a waterfall of pulverized concrete, which we'll come back to. If it were there, it would have destroyed these few remaining core columns around which explosions have removed the building. These are standing 1,000 feet in the air. And finally, there's an explosion, and then they descend through the dust, which is the pulverized concrete, which is shaken off of it. So feature number 3, do we have a straight down symmetrical progression? In this case, outside the footprint of the building. In building 7, it was virtually all inside the footprint of the building. So let's look at the South Tower's asymmetrical destruction. It begins to tip over. That's the asymmetrical part. So we would expect an asymmetrical destruction. We would expect this top part, which is falling off of the building, to continue falling off and end up on the street below. We have asymmetrical damage from that and loading on the structure below from that portion which is falling off. We have asymmetrical damage from the plane impacts. We have asymmetrical damage from the fires. So how in the world, with 22 degrees off of center, do we get complete symmetrical damage, floor by floor, all the way around the building, like the firefighters described, all the way down to the ground? In fact, let's zoom in and look at the leading corner of this destruction. You can see floor by floor, individual explosions. This is not a large mini nuke destroying, or a small mini nuke, destroying the building as some theorize. It's not directed energy weapons. They are individual explosions attacking the perimeter columns floor by floor and all the way around the building. Feature number 4, do we have squibs? In the controlled demolition industry, they call them that. Isolated explosive ejections. Let's take a look, because well down below the zone of destruction, like here, 20 stories down, 40 stories down below the zone of destruction, we have these isolated explosive ejections, even 60 stories down below. No possible way of accounting for these in a gravitational collapse theory, right? This makes no sense whatsoever. And they're carrying solid objects. NIST says these are puffs of air, but these are explosively expelled solid objects ejected at up to 200 feet per second. These are explosive speeds that they're coming out at.
Hey, Richard, not to interrupt your broadcast here, but I've got a question for you.
Go ahead.
Basically, that would take explosives on every floor for this to happen in this manner. Am I wrong?
Just about. Some people say every third floor. It's really hard to tell because the striation is vertical on these buildings and not horizontal.
Right. Okay.
So on the left side of the South Tower, we see dozens of explosive squibs being ejected out in this looped video, indicating lots of explosions, but the fact that the structure is losing its integrity and falling off to the right tells us that the steel structure is being, in essence, liquefied. So it doesn't act as a solid body and fall off the side of the tower. It settles back into the tower because it loses its rigidity as a body. Feature number 5, how fast is the building coming down? Well, we can time it. Let's just do that. On the left, we have a timer. On the right, an animation. Here's 5 seconds. Here's about 9 seconds. In about 15 seconds or more, we have the complete destruction of the entire building. Physicist David Chandler, physics teacher, has given us a physics lesson on this, a very short one.
We are here tracking the motion of the roofline at 0.2 second intervals through approximately 32 meters or 8 stories. This graph shows the height of the roofline as a function of time. The analysis is simpler if we plot velocity as a function of time. On this kind of a graph, a straight line indicates constant acceleration. First note that there is a sudden onset of collapse, as the point we are tracking makes a sudden transition from being at rest to an approximately constant downward acceleration. The slope of the graph indicates that the acceleration is 6.31 meters per second squared downward, which is 64% of free fall.
64% of free fall is almost free fall. That's almost as fast as a bowling ball falling out of the sky, which is how fast Building 7 came down, as we saw.
Wow.
So how can it fall almost as fast as a bowling ball, not slowing down, but accelerating? Every second, it's getting faster and faster through what? Through the 80,000 tons of structural steel around the perimeter and in the core of this building below the point of the plane impact. So this is an extraordinary amount of structural rigidity and capability to slow that down. That's its job, steel columns, to keep the building from falling, right? So what happened to all of that steel? We're going to get to that, but does it even look like a gravitational collapse to you? I mean, just think about it intuitively. What are we seeing? Are we seeing a collapse, or are we seeing a series of perhaps hundreds of explosions right here before us? On the left, the North Tower. On the right, a volcanic eruption in the Tongan Sea. It looks more like that in 2009, with upward, outward arching streamers, a geometry of fireworks, freely flying molten solid objects trailed by thick white smoke clouds. Think about this. This is really important evidence, and it's just the beginning of our exploration, our descent into the rabbit hole of what really happened at the World Trade Center towers. But let's go to feature number 6, total shattering of the steel frame. Well, the National Fire Protection Association, Guide 921 again, for fire and explosion investigation says, look for effects of explosions, particularly shrapnel effects, high order damage characterized by shattering of the structure, producing small pulverized debris, with the building completely demolished and debris thrown great distances. Natural collapses or gravitational collapses or progressive collapses don't throw the steel beams that weigh many, many tons, 600 feet in every direction, which we'll get to. Shrapnel effects. Yeah, all we see at the bottom is not a 20, 30, 40 story pile of crumpled building components or sections, but completely shattered structural steel beams and columns down to their original elements almost, and encompassing across, the entire World Trade Center complex, broken to their original lengths, in this case, 37.5 foot length core columns. And the perimeter columns, oops, I need to make a correction on that one. A perimeter column that are 4 to 8 tons each, not 37.5 feet long. Actually, the perimeter columns are about 30 feet. They're actually different. So that's 244. I'm going to correct the length of those columns for you. And so let's jump to feature number 7, the lateral ejection that we mentioned, because the NFPA 921 says, look also in your investigation for fire and explosions for blast pressure wave effects. What's that mean? Heavy structural steel sections freely flying.
Okay, did we lose you, Richard? Well, give a second for Richard to come back on. Well, while we're waiting for Richard, I'm not surprised. Anytime we got kind of important information to get out there, things seem to interrupt our broadcasting. And as you see, I'm still live here, so something's interfering with Richard. So we'll see. He should be back on here in a second. Okay, while we're waiting for Richard to come back on, we'll go over to a little bit of the border crisis I announced to you guys earlier. For those of you that did not get to see it, I got reports from the Border Patrol down there on the Tucson sector where we have thousands of illegals pushing themselves right on in through our border. And they're getting past Border Patrol right now. They're trying to jump into vehicles. Anybody down there in the Phoenix area, if you're witnessing this, I'd appreciate you guys sharing that with me. Try to get some live footage of it. This is also happening over in, geez, hold on one second and I'll tell you. It's been a long day, guys. Anyhow, just watch my earlier broadcast that I did. I discussed all the areas this is happening in. and they've been pushing themselves right on past Border Patrol, fighting amongst a lot of people to get past everybody, trying to get into people's vehicles. We reported this to you guys. Just stay alert out there. This invasion has gone into full scale on our southern borders, and it's starting to get very chaotic. So, anybody down in the Tucson sector areas, Phoenix areas, just be safe out there. Watch your surroundings, because right now we've got a lot of violence and a lot of crap happening, and I'm not sure if we're going to get Richard back. Let me try to get him back on. Yeah, we're still live. Okay. Okay. Right. Well, kind of like I was just telling the audience, Richard. Here, I'm going to put you over on speaker. Kind of like us, kind of like us telling the audience. You know, a lot of the stuff that we talk about. Next thing you know, our internet crashes, or it just gets totally muted out. What we're saying. It's like they don't want the American people knowing what's going on.
Yeah, I've seen that happen before. And right now we've rebooted the internet, and we're going to try to get back up like right away. So let us know in the comments, you guys, how the evidence is working for you or not so far. What are you seeing? What is impressing you?
Yeah. Well, Richard, you have done thorough work on this. You have done a great job explaining this and going into detail on what occurred. And, it's quite obvious. I mean, you can see the explosions, and it looked like it was multiple chain reaction explosions all the way down those towers. So I mean, that's clear as day. And anybody that was watching could see it just as much as we can. So,
and not only that, but when we get to session 3, we go and we see the actual components, thermite and nanothermite, that are responsible, and in addition to high energy explosives. There's a mix of stuff going on here. We have the physical evidence of red-gray chips that we're going to be talking about in session 3. That were found in all of the World Trade Center dust samples. And a team of 8 international scientists have examined this in great detail and produced a 25-page peer-reviewed paper, publishing it in 2009 in the Bentham Open Chemical Physics Journal. And it stands uncontested. No one has submitted a peer-reviewed paper to contest the results of what is very obviously and provably nanothermite, red-gray chips. They look like paint chips, but they're in all the World Trade Center dust samples, and they're attracted by a magnet, so they have a high iron content. So we look very carefully at these red-gray chips, find that they also have aluminum. This is the ingredients of thermite, iron, and aluminum. In this case, at the nano scale,
right.
Sometimes smaller than the diameter of human hair. So that's my most powerful evidentiary, or not the most powerful, but one of several actually, very powerful pieces of evidence. But we've been looking at so far today is extremely powerful. Like you said, when you see the explosions in front of your face and you zoom in on them, and The mainstream media has not shown most of these videos that we're showing you for these reasons. That they just don't want the public to know that this is an intentionally engineered and executed plan that was designed to manipulate the American people into a motivation, if you will, to a cry for revenge or war. And I was one of them. John, I wanted to go into Afghanistan and get those bastards who did this to
Right.
us. And it turns out that Osama bin Laden even denied involvement in this particular one. He actually said, if you want to know who did this, look to the shadow state within the government of the United States that wants to make this century a century of conflict between Islam and Christianity. That doesn't sound like a proud terrorist.
Yep. Well, you take a look, Richard, look at what's happening, and I hate to have to compare the borders with 9/11, but I think our borders are going to be the next 9/11. I mean, they have tried to cover this up. We just had Governor Hobbs of Arizona down there at the border, down in Lukeville. I couldn't think of the name of it a minute ago when I was telling these guys. Lukeville, Arizona, down there, we've got African American, we've got Chinese, you've got the Hispanics just pushing right past Border Patrol now by the thousands. And this came in right from Border Patrol today to me. I just never mentioned their names. But at the same time, and this is also happening in Phoenix, and they're actually trying to carjack people, trying to force their way into cars, whatever. And none of your news channels are covering this. They act like, I mean, you listen to Hobbs, she wants the port of entries reopened right away. And she's been announcing it right here on our local news. So this right now is another invasion right here on our soil.
And they're letting it happen.
And they're letting it happen. And the American people are not ready for what's heading our way. I'll tell you. 90% are still asleep, even though I've been down on the border reporting this right on the front lines of the garbage. And you'd be surprised how many people just blow caution to the wind. Like, if it's not on my home front, I'm not going to worry about it. Kind of mentality. So, let's see. I don't see you. How's your computer doing?
Not good. I keep trying to get on, and the router is booted up by this time. But the internet looks like I have a system down. That has happened once in a while. This is a remarkably reliable company here. We pay $125 a month. Got really great speeds too.
Right.
But it kind of reminds me this letting it happen. I've been looking at the Hamas invasion of Israel also, and have found some very disturbing patterns, some parallels between 9/11 as we're looking at it, and as we're not looking at it in this particular series, but others in the 9/11 Truth Movement have gone into. For instance, they establish goals that they want to achieve. In the case of 9/11, the Project for a New American Century, a neocon think tank that was established before the Bush administration came to power by people like Bill Kristol and Jeb Bush and Robert Kagan. These neocons following, I think it's Leo Strauss, thinking they want to dominate the world. In fact, they said we need regional hegemony in the Middle East in their publicly available document, Rebuilding America's Defenses.
Right.
And they want they so we've got to have space dominance. We've got to have a multi-billion-dollar increase in the Pentagon budget. But they said, absent a catalyzing and catastrophic event like a new Pearl Harbor, these goals will likely take a long, long time. Well, Bush wrote in his diary that night, today we had our new Pearl Harbor. And indeed, they did, because Pearl Harbor was yet another example, as documented by author Robert Stinnett in his book, Day of Deceit. They had cracked the Japanese codes and found that they were going to plan an attack against Hawaii and the ships in Honolulu. And why? Because the United States had imposed an oil embargo against Japan in the middle of its unholy, if you will, war against the rest of the East out there in their attempt to establish their empire. And so Roosevelt knew that this attack was coming. They moved the ships, the best ships, out of Hawaii and left the other ones there as, to be sacrificed in order to use that Catholic this event to manipulate the American people to get into World War II, because this is what they were trying to do. Americans were notoriously isolationist for good reason. They did not want to get into these European wars. But that one dragged us straight in because all of a sudden we got attacked. Well, we wouldn't have gotten attacked had we not economic war engaged in economic warfare against the Japanese country.
Right. Well, tell me if you're aware of this, Richard. Like on 9/11, I was reported to that most of your important officials and people that would have been normally in that building that day, for some reason, just didn't show up to work that day. Have you heard that?
It's well known and well documented, and I can't even tell you where to find that information. But a lot of this information outside and inside of the body of technical evidence can be found in the series of 14 books produced by author David Ray Griffin, who is unfortunately passed away earlier this year. And he has done an extraordinary amount of research, and his clarity and logic is impeccable. And we consider him the grandfather of the 9/11 truth movement. One of his two books, two in particular, 9/11 New Pearl Harbor and 9/11 New Pearl Harbor Revisited, go into some detail around who the hijackers were, the fact that they may not have even been on the planes, and how the planes were guided, if not to their targets, and all kinds of additional and important information. One book was called 9/11 Commission Omissions and Distortions. This was the 9/11 Commission report was a complete whitewash, and that exposes the entire commission as, again, deep state insiders who had conflicts of interest, and one of them resigned in disgust, citing Max Cleland, citing this investigation is now compromised, and the commission's lawyer, John Farmer, said there was a decision at one point not to tell the American people, the truth about 9/11. And so he says the commission report was not on the level. He stopped short of calling it a pack of lies, but
right.
That's exactly what is revealed by David Ray Griffin's excellent book, 9/11 Commission, Omissions and Distortions.
Well, again, you see all the corruption within our country. I guess my question is, at the end of the day, you guys get all this proven to where, it needs to be, which in my book, you've done a great job already. Um, what are they going to do to the people that were involved in this? I mean, the government has the knowledge and understanding what really took place. They're not. I know they know. What do you think is going to be the outcome if this all comes forth and they definitely say, yeah, our government was corrupt and this is what they did? Do you think anything is going to happen to those people, or?
Yeah, well, if we have our way and we get a real investigation, an unimpeachable investigation, one that is not corrupt like the 9/11 Commission was corrupt, we would expect that the American people, upon finding the results of that, which we're presenting in our three-session series here, would throw out every member of Congress, because not one of them, other than Cynthia McKinney, stood up to call a spade and demand a new investigation. That shows you the power of the deep state, that they can effectively, I don't know how they do it, bribery, blackmail, every member of Congress virtually. So we've got to replace all of them, and that's what we're going to be learning at America Fest, how to do exactly that. Because
Exactly.
I'm including Republicans, because we've got people who are bought and paid for and have not stood up to demand a new investigation.
Well, that's something I've been telling everybody. Anymore, I'm beating up on the Republicans just as much as I'm doing the Democrats. I mean, everything going on in our country, I blame both sides of the aisle. They both had turned a blind eye to all this. They know it's happening, just like 9/11. But what you're saying right here is so true. I mean, how can our Republican Party as well sit there and take sides when the facts are right there before them? I mean that. Bobby Alvarez, can you hear Richard? Okay.
Hello. I am being heard, hopefully. You know what? One of the other problems that we have, that 9/11 illuminates so many corruptions in our government, John. We have COVID. You're not streaming on YouTube, are you?
This is going all over, including your news. And Bobby just answered and said yes, they can hear you just fine.
YouTube has a way of taking down any videos that show truth about what's really going on with the COVID scamdemic, and
right.
I don't want to ruin your YouTube platform if that's where you're also streaming to. But if you don't care, then I will share with our listeners, while we're waiting for our internet to come up, back up, the parallels between 9/11 and COVID.
You still with me?
I didn't hear your response, John.
No. Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Share away.
All right, and I'm hitting, my.
We just use the C word instead of the full word.
See, we have to be careful.
Yeah.
We have to self-censor. That's what they taught us to do in the censorship cancel culture. You got corporations that conspire to create a false pandemic, and then they have the solution to their false pandemic. This is called problem, reaction, solution. It's a classic Hegelian dialectic that is responsible for the the triggers that are a part of the war system. War is a system that economically benefits the arms industry, the oil industry, the banking industry, the insurance industry. And in the case of 9/11, that's what 9/11 was, a false flag operation that triggered a war against a pre-selected target against which we had coveted their resources, including the opium production in Afghanistan and the oil production in Iraq. People don't realize that 90% of the world's opium came from Afghanistan, and that those profits before the Taliban came to power in that area were 4 times all of the oil company profits put together. That's how powerful the drug industry was, and the CIA's in control of it internationally is not to be trifled with. So the Taliban got kicked out, but before they did, they had shut down the opium production from 2,800 metric tons per year by the UN standards down to about 285 metric tons. A huge decrease, 90% decrease. And so after we kicked out the Taliban in 2001, the opium production increased to 3,600 metric tons, more than ever was under the Taliban, before the Taliban. And then a few years later, 6,500 metric tons. Well, guess what the Taliban just did after they kicked us out of their country?
Yeah.
They stopped last year. They stopped the opium production once again, and so that has dramatically affected world opium prices. They're apparently creating food for their country instead of the big cash crop of drugs. Now, I'm not a Taliban fan. I'm just reciting the facts as I've become aware of them. This is international news, like in the last 2-3 weeks.
Right.
So we know about 9/11 and the power of triggering wars for a war system. Well, the COVID system is a bit of a war system. Also, it's a war on the people of the world. And if we can convince people that there is a pandemic, and there is plenty of evidence that there never was a pandemic, because what they had to do was to create cases through false positive results on a PCR test that was designed to not that its developer, Terry Mullis, Nobel Peace Prize winner, said this is not for the diagnosing of disease. With it, you can find almost anything in anybody. And that's what they did. They found that kiwi fruits and bananas had COVID as well. The instances of false positives created the cases. The cases were not based on symptoms even in most situations. But then with all of these cases, you got people coming in, and people getting the flu are being positively diagnosed. They're being rushed to the hospitals, given remdesivir, and put on ventilators, causing them to have kidney failure and die.
Yep.
And this is most of the COVID deaths. This is what's responsible for most of them.
Oh, yeah. Just take a look at how many doctors are finally coming forth and speaking out about it, that have actually resigned from the hospitals and stuff, where they're opening up their own private clinics now, because they know. So.
And the hospitals were never overcrowded, as has been claimed. I am periodically checking my internet, by the way. But we found at least 13 parallels in the pandemic. One, foreknowledge. on insider trading. Insiders traded. And by the way, insider trading in 9/11, millions were made betting on the fate of the airliners would go down the next day dramatically. If they didn't, millions and millions would have been lost. But a lot of money was made, and the 9/11 Commission, they said they investigated this, but we found that it wasn't traced to Al Qaeda. So we didn't have to look any farther because it wasn't insider trading, because Al Qaeda was the only insiders. Well, wait a minute. Who was it traced to? Deutsche Bank. Deutsche Bank is a notorious criminal enterprise run by Buzzy Krongard, former CIA head, and others. So insider trading in the case of COVID, of the COVID-2, we have 4 Senate Intelligence Investigation Committee members being investigated for insider trading relative to what they heard from the intelligence agencies about COVID, and then they did their trading and they got caught. We have foreknowledge in terms of predictive programming. In 9/11, there's 68, at least 68 separate examples of the towers being attacked, in some cases by Muslims with bombs, in cartoons, in Hollywood, in the Lone Gunman Files, like series, in Simpsons. It goes on and on and on in the months and years before 9/11. I have in my presentation on this subject many examples. Well, we also have, for instance, the Olympics in 2012, 10 years ago, with sick children at the opening ceremony of the Summer Olympics in London. Hundreds of hospital beds overseen, with sick children in them, overseen by this gargoyle-like figure with a needle-like object in his hand, terrorizing them. What does this have to do with inspiration and the Olympics? This is obviously predictive programming, one of many examples. They even have the hints of Wuhan with the Chinese gal who was prominently figured. We have drills that are going on in 9/11. Before 9/11, air drills that took our Air Force jets east and west up to Canada and up to the Arctic, leaving the eastern corridor vulnerable to an attack. Well, that's rather extraordinary. So drills, right, happen, and then they go live. They actually also have 43 separate drills, and many of them were still going on the morning of 9/11, during which there were false blips of hijackers hijacking airliners as part of the exercise, completely confusing the air traffic controllers because they also got some real hijacker notifications. So they were completely confused, and they couldn't get the Air Force or NORAD to stop the simulations until after both towers were hit. So there's an example of drills, foreknowledge also. But parallel number 4, the abuse of science. That's what we've been looking at in 9/11 with regard to NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. The complete abuse of science with regard to their report, which doesn't look at any of the evidence that we've been looking at in session 1 and session 2 of this series, especially session 3 with the nanothermite that we're going to be looking at in some detail. So there's a complete abuse of science. They create a climate of fear with these triggers. So of course we're all in fear, right? After 9/11, in fact, they have a meter, the terror meter. If it gets up to yellow or orange or even red, it tells you how scared you should be. Put duct tape on your windows. We might have a local terrorist cell attempting to do a biochemical attack drill in our neighborhood. So put plastic over your windows. So we have this climate of fear that's just terrorizing the people too, and that's the whole concept. If you terrorize the people enough, they will support the war, because the war is the solution to the problem, the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan.
Well, Richard, I believe our next terrorist attack, and I've been saying this to my audience quite a bit, I believe they're going to hit us with the fentanyl. I think they're going to hit our crops, our waterways. I mean, it wouldn't be hard to even dust us with it, with aircraft. I mean, by the time the American people realizes what the heck just hit them, there would be millions of Americans dead. And that's the only explanation I have for all the fentanyl they're bringing into our country. That's a good prime example, because right now we've got enough fentanyl on U.S. soil to last at least 100 years, if not more. So, so as far as the money market, the money market's not there anymore because there's such an overabundance of it. So they've got to lower the prices in order for people to keep, for competition, because there's so much of it. So, but
that comes from China?
Oh, it's coming China, Mexico, other countries. Oh yeah, other countries are bringing it in as well. Even Africans are bringing it in. So I mean, this is happening from all over the globe, and it's coming right through our borders. So
Well, they'll have a solution for that problem also, which needs to be developed. The parallels between 9/11 and COVID, the parallels between 9/11 and Gaza that we haven't even talked about yet. And now when this next wave of attack comes, we got to do the parallel. We got to get all our data lined up so we can do the parallels between 9/11 and this fentanyl invasion if it happens, because they'll have a solution, which is parallel number 6, that's far worse than the original problem. Right? The vaccine, as they call it, is far worse and has killed many, many millions more people than this false disease, this hoax ever did. And that's proven in all the data and in my presentation on this subject, which we can do another time when we get through this series on 9/11. But there's also false accounts put out by officials. They will lie to us.
Oh yeah.
They will tell us that the hospitals are overcrowded. They will give us all kinds of things to be afraid of, so that we'll be begging for the solution in our arms, in this case, with an extreme control over the narrative by Fauci, top-level NGOs and government organizations too.
Right.
And there's no real investigation of the origins of COVID, for instance. We talked about the 9/11 Commission report relative to 9/11, but the Lancet, the most prestigious medical journal in the country, actually created a commission to find out where did this virus come from. Well, they were expecting them they were expecting to control them and to find that it came from bats, right? But that narrative completely fell apart, especially when the leader, Jeffrey Sachs of the COVID Commission, COVID Origin Commission, I think it was called, he says, I don't think so. This looks like it does not have a natural origin. This looks like it was created in a lab. So he got fired, and he's been speaking out ever since. So that's the kind of investigations we get. And then parallel number 10, an elusive, powerful enemy is created. You better be afraid. I remember in 2020, if I touched an ATM machine, I could die or transmit that to somebody else. I was really afraid. I mean, I was using that toxic antiseptic cleaner for your hands.
Right.
So this, you can't see a virus. Well, you can't see a terrorist cell either, but they had to prove somehow that they were there. So the FBI infiltrates these Muslim communities and finds some people with mental problems and convinces them that they should really do something, and then funds them and get them to do illegal things, and they call it terrorism. All of them have been FBI infiltrated prior to their activities.
Yeah, and that's been proven time after time.
FBI is out of control in this country, John, and I think you know more about that.
Yes, I 100% agree.
And then parallel number 11, they have this control of the information and a shifting narrative by top agencies that shifts because people aren't buying it anymore, such as the came from bats virus. The people aren't buying it anymore. Osama bin Laden, they kept him alive even after he died in 2002 of kidney failure. Or was it liver failure? One of those two. They hid that information. It's very well documented in Pakistan and on David Ray Griffin's book, Is Osama bin Laden Dead or Alive? And we have the boogeyman who's evaded the top intelligence and defensive apparatus in the world for 10 years. And all of a sudden, Obama catches him and takes him out to sea and dumps him before anybody can see the body. So it's like, no, there was no body to show. Sorry. So this is control of information and the shifting narrative. People who wake up, they don't buy the narrative anymore. And so with parallel number 12, we have media censorship of truth tellers like we've been doing, you've been doing down at the border, I've been doing with regard to the destruction of the 3 World Trade Center skyscrapers on 9/11. And by the way, my internet is still down, so we'll continue.
Well, that's probably part of the censorship right there, your internet being down.
Yeah, and they attack you. You're a conspiracy theorist if you raise questions.
That's right.
You can't even question. In fact, it was so unpatriotic to question the government because you're doubting soldiers. You're not backing our troops. If you doubted this, they were risking their lives for our freedom. Well, I'm not so sure about that. It looks like they were risking their lives for a deep state global Middle East takeover by the American empire. That's what I'm waking up to. And then, of course, 13 is the solution in the case of 9/11, the implementation of draconian policies and surveillance through the Military Commissions Act, the National Authorization Act of 2012, and the Patriot Act. Now, any of us, you, me, can be arrested without a right to a lawyer, a trial, a jury.
Oh, exactly.
We have lost our civil liberties.
Yep.
All they have to do is say that we were associated with terrorism. How is that defined?
Yep.
Use of force.
Yep. Well, just look at January 6th. I mean, look at how many people has been incarcerated and still not even a charge once been filed against them, but they've got them incarcerated. I mean, these guys have been incarcerated for what, 3 years now?
Yeah, I bet it was the Patriot Act that enabled them to do that.
That's what I'm thinking. Yep.
So it's incredible. And so that's what I've uncovered with regard to the parallels between 9/11 and COVID. In a nutshell, it's a 2.5-hour presentation that we just did in a half an hour. But I am also writing an article on the parallels between 9/11 and Gaza because there's a 40-page paper, for instance, that's been released by the New York Times got a hold of it. I guess it was leaked. It's the complete battle plan for Hamas that the IDF, Israeli Defense Force, had in their possession for a year before Hamas invaded. They had warnings from Egypt. They had intelligence from their infiltrators, because they had actually funded initially Hamas 30 years ago or so, 20 years, and they had been supporting them with cash payments in suitcases. This is also very well documented for since then. So they created a Frankenstein. And what Netanyahu said is we have to support Hamas. He said this in 2019 to his Likud party because we've got to create a foil, if you will, to Arafat and the Palestine Liberation Organization so that they're fighting themselves, divide and conquer, right?
Right.
So they created a much more fanatical version with religious fundamentalism in Hamas, and then pretended to not hear the numerous intelligence agents who were reporting to them the exercises that Hamas was doing on the other side of the fence, simulating an attack of a town. It's like, this is right out in the open. And again, Israel is even more sophisticated in their intelligence operations than the United States.
Oh, yeah.
They teach the U.S. intelligence. So they knew this was happening, and they obviously let it happen. In fact, reporters who contract with AP, Reuters, and the New York Times were embedded with Hamas, taking all of their pictures and documenting this whole extravaganza across the border. And this was all allowed to happen. And then so they have an intelligence failure across 15 points along the border, none of which were detected.
Yeah.
And no response for 7 hours after this. The Apache helicopters are 10 minutes away.
Right.
Even if there was they took out our signals with drones, our cellular towers, that would have invited in 10 minutes an Apache helicopter that could have obviously nailed most of those tractors, which were lumbering toward the fence, the pickup trucks and so forth, which had to go 30 miles to get into Israel. And the Apache helicopters, it turns out, the pilots are acknowledging that they were strafing Israeli citizens as well as Hamas because they said they couldn't tell the difference.
You know, Richard, I'm glad you brought all this up, because I just want to say something about our borders right now in this conversation. You know, you look at what's happening on our southern borders. You look at the politicians going down, the governor going down, acting like we got to get our borders reopened, and they show a picture where there's no illegals in the background with her while she's down there and all this stuff. And we know for a fact that the border down there is being overran as we speak. You know, what I see coming, and American people, they can either agree with me or not. I believe this is intentional. I believe they want this invasion on our borders. I truly believe that that's going to give the Biden administration reason to declare martial law, declare an invasion on our homeland now, declare martial law. You know, bring in the troops, the whole 9 yards, just shut everything down. I believe this is the way he's going to try to remain in office, is what I see coming next. And,
well, they can't afford to let Trump win, that's for sure.
Yep, because they know Trump, I like Trump's approach, look, just wipe out the cartel. Let's just be done with it all. And I 100% support that way of thinking, because that's what needs to be done at this point.
And that's because you're aware of these types of false flag operations that we've been mentioning, the disease of 3 and 2 years ago, the 9/11 of 22 years ago, the Hamas invasion of October 7th. I mean, we can see through all of these things. And so now you can almost predict the next one. And it's not so hard to do for you because you've got your nose on the border down there looking at what's happening and reporting on it, daily or weekly.
Yeah,
I mean, God bless you for doing that work.
Yeah. I can tell you, we are definitely right on the front lines, and what we see, we try to get it out to America. There's a lot of stuff we're not even able to show the American people. It's too graphic. I know they'd shut down my pages, including, I'm not even so sure the news channel would share it, but so far they've been great about sharing everything I've put on your news. But a lot of this is very graphic stuff that, I know Facebook would automatically shut me down. So I've got to be careful about what I can and what I do share. I've got to be very careful. Hey, Richard, we've been on here, looks like an hour and 20 minutes. So why don't we shoot for tomorrow, and hopefully you'll have your internet up and going. But
do you want to start over with session 2, or do you want to pick up where we left off?
We can just pick up where we left off. We've had a good group of audience here that's been following each session. So let's just pick up where we left off at.
That sounds great, John. We'll do that. Thanks so much for having the courage to do your work and to bring 9/11 to your audience as well.
Yeah, well, again, this is another problem with our government that needs to be exposed and gotten out there to the American people. And and I'm all about exposing the corrupt.
Right, let's do it.
All right.
And don't forget to tell people about America Fest coming up next week, because that's extraordinary.
Yep.
We're looking forward to meeting 10,000 people gathered to hear some incredible
stories. Yeah, this is going to be a great event, and that's the America Fest in in Phoenix, Arizona, not Tucson. Phoenix, Arizona, starting next Saturday. We'll be live broadcasting from there, and looks like Richard's going to try to be there as well. And we'll go from there.
Might even find myself down at the border with you. Huh?
You got it. That would be a great trip. So
yeah, incredible. Amfest.com. AMFEST. Amfest.com. Learn more. We'll see you guys there.
All right, guys. Well, God bless all of you. God bless you, Richard. Appreciate you being on here again tonight. I'm not surprised they shut you down, but I appreciate you being on and getting out there what you could. And we'll be back live tomorrow. So, all right. I'll talk to you soon. All right, bye. Until then, guys, hope everybody had a great Sunday. Keep our country in your prayers. Keep our men and women down on the border in your prayers. We just got so much happening, and just need to definitely keep your eyes open and keep your loved ones safe. Until tomorrow, guys, this is Jonathan Alexander reporting live with Live Border News, and you guys try to have a wonderful night. God bless.